Kevin McCarthy faces threats to his job, with some in the GOP who oppose the deal getting ready to call for the vote of no confidence that only requires one person at this point. So, we'll be talking about where Kevin McCarthy is in the standings, what's going to happen with him, and what's going to happen with this deal as well. In other news, Ron DeSantis bets big on Iowa as he goes through and makes his first official 2024 campaign swing. The ones that happened before he announced, of course, did not count, but we'll be talking about that. What's happening there, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the on-the-ground campaign with DeSantis, what it means, and what some of this is, where some of the failures are and where some of the successes could be. This, as I said yesterday, this is not going to become a Ron DeSantis hate channel. In more news here, drone attacks are being traded across the board between Moscow and Kiev as our blue and yellow friends over on Twitter keep reminding us that, oh no, this is only a defensive war. Stop trying to stop the funding over there, you bigot. And finally, Chuck Schumer, in his latest gaffe, slams the MAGA Supreme Court that voted 9-0 against the EPA, including all those people that he advocated for being on the court. It is going to be all of this and more. Save the clock tower, everybody. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Kind of makes you want to play Metroid, doesn't it? Really kind of makes me want to take my GameCube over and get it fixed. It's been something I've been wanting to do since I moved here, and I found a place that would actually fix the damn thing. The optical drive went out, and I've got a bunch of games on GameCube that I like, including the original 2 Metroid Primes. One of 2 I finished. The other one, not so much. Plus the Twilight Princess, and again, I want to get a capture card too, and play some of these with you guys, but I do work a lot. It's summer out right now, so I don't get as much of a chance to do this as I'd like to. But still, community and conversations and a whole lot of things like that. But we've got a lot of news to get to here tonight over on Contemporary. With the debt seal supposedly going to be closed up and voted on and done and gone within the next few days, which I don't buy. For a half a second right now, the Ukraine war is coming back into focus as 2 of our warmongers in the city of Washington, D.C. do want to remind you that it's time to go send more money over to the Ukraine. So we're going to be talking about that. We'll talk about the debt ceiling, the DeSantis thing, which, like I said in the cold open, this is not going to be a DeSantis hate channel. I don't like DeSantis, and I will not vote for him, but that does not mean I'm, like we said yesterday with the furry thing, I will praise him when he does good. And I will offer advice because, above all else, even if I won't vote for him, and this is something that I have been very, very adamant and vocal about, is I do want to see Trump people and DeSantis people come together because, God, I don't want 4 more years of Biden. And again, I don't care which one of them is the nominee. I don't. They both suck. But we still need to come back out and get these people working together because, Biden sucks more. But regardless, we've got that. We've got debt ceiling news, Ken Paxton news that we didn't get to yesterday. And again, as we get down towards the bottom of the show, the big one is going to be some of our foreign news here. But we're going to get down to all of that over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming, such as the Daily Ignoramus, who may or may not be going right at the same time as us. I know he started maybe an hour before we did, so, and he does 3-4 hours at a time, so we'll probably be running a little bit opposite to each other, which I try to avoid. But go check out the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the R-rated conservative, who has been on for 4 years. His 4-year anniversary streaming was yesterday. I watched some of that after the stream. I know I rated, but then, RRC came on, so we listened to that instead. Go give him a congratulations for 4 years. That is only on Rumble now. No more YouTube or DLive for that. But also, if you're more in the mood for audio only, go check out the No Gimmicks podcast. If gaming is more your style, we've got Mr. Behavior and Silent Caster you can go check out. More on the Culture War side, you can go check out Tweets by Brit. And if you want to take news from a little bit of a lighthearted form, go check out the Clown World Chronicles with Papa Palpatine. Go check out all of those great programs as we aim to bring you a better news experience from the common man for the common man. Stop getting your news from people who wear suits that cost more than your house. Start getting your news from people who are just like you. And with that, let's get down into it. Let's get started. Let's see if I mute when I change scenes again, by the way. That seems to be a problem lately. But let's get started. Let's get down into it. And we're going to start with our finance for the day. Nope, sound is still on for that. All right. Let's get the live chats up here so I can see what you guys are doing as well. I did not get the call, by the way, so I don't think she heard that. I'm going to call home tonight just to make sure and see what everybody's doing, because, again, everybody worked all weekend, so we'll see what happens with that. Grant says, who are you picking for the NBA Finals, the Miami Heat or the Denver Nuggets? I have no idea. One of my favorite people in the world who passed away way too young was nicknamed Nuggets, so I'm going to have to maybe go with that, but yeah, for basketball, I couldn't even tell you. I didn't even know the finals were going on. So that's where I'm at with the finals. All right, let's get down into the finance. All right, we start today with the Dow, which is at 33,042.78. That's having another down day, which is surprising because we were told that everything was going to be up because of the debt ceiling and everything was saved and everything was fixed and we're all free and all of our futures are going to look up. Well, that may not be the case after all. Now, this is a wild swing down and then back up towards the previous close, only being down 50.56 points or 0.15%, but that is after spending most of the day nearly a full percent down. So it's been an interesting day in the Dow. We will see what happens with that and where that goes. Looking at your Bitcoin, which has had an even more interesting day. It's been down, it's been up, it's been down, it's been way up, it's been way down, and settling itself somewhere across the middle. Again, the Dow ending at 27,769 US dollars and 60 US cents. That is up 24 US dollars and 80 US cents or 0.09% on the day. So after all those wild swings, it didn't really go anywhere. Looking in at your gas prices around Madison, mostly unchanged. Remember, these gas prices may not reflect your local gas prices. Check your local listings to see what your local stations are doing. But when we look into the Madison area, we've got 350 on the west side with a 340 outlier at the Speedway and a 360 outlier at the BP. On the Isthmus, we have 360 going out to the east side. We have 350 the rest of the way around with a single 330 outlier on the east side. So for the most part, everything's staying the same with a couple swinging on the outside. Do check your local listings, see what your gas prices are, but we will see if these stick with a trend that seems to reflect what's happening around the rest of the country. All right, let's grab our finance article for the day, and that comes to us from CNBC today. With advertisements abound, Dow finishes Tuesday lower as Wall Street weighs odds of debt ceiling deal clearing Congress. From Alex Herring and Brian Evans. The Dow Jones fell on Tuesday as Wall Street considered the likelihood of Congress passing a tentative deal on raising the U.S. debt ceiling. The 30 stock index lost 50.56 points or 0.15% and at 33,042.78. The S&P eked out a 0.002% gain to close at 4205.52. So they're talking like 1 point of gain. after trading both above and below the flat line during the session. The Nasdaq added 0.32 to finish at 13,017.43, pairing gains after trading up as much as 1.4% early in the day. President Biden and Kevin McCarthy reached an agreement to raise the debt ceiling to avoid a default over the weekend, with Congress set to vote on the legislation as early as Wednesday. Both Republican and Democratic support is needed for the proposed bill to pass. The agreement comes just days before the so-called X date on Monday, which is the earliest date the Treasury Department has signaled the U.S. could default on its debt obligations. The long negotiations between the White House and congressional leaders raised concern among investors that a default could take place. Despite the tentative agreement, obstacles remain on the path to passage for the compromise bill in the House amid growing opposition within the GOP. I am 55-45 that this fails right now. We'll be talking about that when we get into the debt ceiling talks themselves. But yes, as of right now, just given who is on board, what is in the bill, and what it means for the people who are supporting the politicians that have to vote for this, I am 55-45 that this fails. This could really go either direction, but I am leaning ever so slightly into fail territory. Markets climb, walls of worry at the end of the day. The debt ceiling is obviously some type of worry, said Chris Bartow, investment analyst at Fort Pitt Capital. I think the market is kind of pricing in some sort of deal gets done. Concerns over the potential for another interest rate hike also weighed on investor sentiment. Traders are pricing in a 68.8% chance the Federal Reserve rate increase next month, according to CME Group's Fed Watch tool. So, a few things to look at with the finance, especially if you're trying to put something in for retirement right now. We will see what happens with this. If you are a employee at Goldman Sachs, though, I've got some bad news for you. Goldman Sachs to chop 250 more workers after David's demolition day, sources say, from Lydia Moynihan. I don't know enough about hockey either, honestly. I wanted to get into hockey when everybody else was going super woke, but I don't know enough about the schedule that I could sit down and enjoy it. I know that where I was living before, the Blackhawks were a local team, and that seems to be who I would go with. The Wild would probably be the home team now, given where I live. All right, let's look at this. Goldman Sachs plans to make another round of job cuts, its third in less than a year, as deal-making profits continue to tank, sources told the Post on Tuesday. The David Solomon-led investment bank will cull an additional 250 workers on the heels of 3,200 being fired in January in what staff had dubbed David's Demolition Day, an insider said. The latest layoffs could come in the next few weeks, as the cuts will hit employees at every level, including managing directors and other senior executives, according to the Wall Street Journal. In September, the Wall Street giant, which had 45,000 employees, had pink-slipped 1% to 5% of its underperformers. A Goldman Sachs spokesperson declined to comment. So, well, again, if you're working for Goldman Sachs, sorry, bro. So that is what we have for that. Let's talk the debt ceiling. And we're going to start with the Dissociated Press, or the DP, if you will. Facing GOP backlash, McCarthy labors to shore up votes for debt deal in time to prevent U.S. default. Well, you might have to be back to the drawing board in a hurry, Kevin. From Lisa Mascaro, Kevin Freaking, and Stephen Groves. Under fire from conservatives, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy worked strenuously Tuesday to sell fellow Republicans on a piece of crap debt ceiling and budget deal he negotiated with President Brandon and win approval in time to avert a potentially disastrous U.S. default. Leaders of the hard right House Freedom Caucus lambasted the compromise as falling well short of the spending cuts they demand, and they vow to try to halt passage by Congress. A much larger conservative faction, the Republican Study Committee, declined to take a position, leaving McCarthy hunting votes. Hey, look, we can listen to President Brandon himself with a quote that I think we heard yesterday in me doing Biden voice, but we didn't have a video with it. Let's see what this looks like.
Give us an update on the debt ceiling deal.
That guy looks so tired and weak.
Look, you know I never say I'm confident what the Congress is going to do, but I feel very good about it. I've spoken to a number of the members. I spoke to McConnell. I spoke to a whole bunch of people, and it feels good. We'll see when the vote starts. And look, one of the things that I hear some of you guys saying is, why doesn't Biden say what a good deal it is? Why would Biden be saying what a good deal is before the vote? You think that's going to help me get it passed? No.
Who got the better deal, Democrats or Republicans?
It's a bipartisan deal. Oh, yes.
No question.
Well, you realize you're not in the real world. No question.
What
There's
the?
no reason why it shouldn't get done by the 5th. I'm confident that we'll get a vote in both houses, and we'll see.
What's the message to House Democrats who have reservations about this compromise bill?
Talk to me.
Oh, man. You guys don't live in the real world, man. Really? Come on. 80 million votes, folks. With tough days ahead, the Speaker urged skeptical GOP colleagues to look at where the victories are. Unhelpfully for Biden, he said the Democrats on Fox and Friends, there's nothing in the bill for them. Yeah, that little bit of rhetoric is going to be going back and forth, and Biden says that we've got an internal release from the Biden camp that says that they got everything that they wanted, and the Republicans got nothing. I'm thinking that this is going to be on the hopes that their Democrat colleagues don't read it and just vote for it because, hey man, I passed it, and you fall in line and you vote for it, man. A key test was coming late Tuesday when the House Rules Committee was to consider the 99-page bill and vote on sending it to the full House for a vote expected Wednesday evening. The Rules Committee debate was filled with objections from both left and right, yet in a notable development, Libertarian Republican, Thomas Massey of Kentucky said he would vote in favor of advancing the bill to the House floor, almost ensuring it would clear the first hurdle. Quick approval by both House and Senate would ensure government checks will continue to go out to Social Security recipients, because we have to put that fear porn in here, veterans and others, to prevent financial upheaval worldwide by allowing Treasury to keep paying U.S. debts. The deal would restrict spending over the next 2 years, but it includes environmental policy changes and expanded work requirements for some older food aid recipients that Democrats strongly oppose. McCarthy said he'd be talking with lawmakers in the evening as they return to Washington from the long Memorial Day weekend, ahead of a crucial vote. This is just the first step, McCarthy said, of his agreement with Biden. With few lawmakers expected to be fully satisfied, Biden, a Democrat, and McCarthy, a Republican, are counting on pulling the majority support from the political center, a rarity in a divided Washington, to prevent federal default. Some 218 votes are needed for passage in the 435-member House. So that is where they are at with that. We'll grab one from our friends over at NPR. Far right members threaten a reckoning over McCarthy's debt limit deal. This is from Barbara Sprunt and Deirdre Walsh. And remember, NPR is only 10% government funded, and with advertising in the toilet, they need your donation. Support from viewers like you to tell you that anybody who doesn't agree with them is far right, threatening a reckoning over the good little boy in the Republican Party that we have control of. So remember, hit that donate button, because NPR is never printing reality. National Progressive Radio. Well, let's see what it is that they have to say about this. I don't know if that's picking up on the mic, but you can tell I live close to the airport. God. Anger over House Speaker McCarthy's deal with President Biden to raise the debt ceiling is bubbling over, with some conservative members threatening to oust McCarthy as the Speaker. This deal fails completely, and that's why these members and others will be absolutely opposed to the deal, and we will do everything in our power to stop it, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania said during a press conference with caucus members on Tuesday. Chip Roy, a member of the Freedom Caucus, was even more blunt. The Republican conference right now has been torn asunder. He said not one Republican should vote for this deal. Not one. I want the live chat up here. I want the live chat up. I like the live chat up. Grant says the whole thing was ruined when they made it co-ed. Dude, did you see? I saw it, I think it was on Instagram earlier, where the White House was making a big deal about the fact that Kamala Harris was going to welcome Brittany Griner back to the court. I didn't realize how masculine Brittany Griner looked. Like, I'd only ever seen the orange jumpsuit suit in the face. I saw her in the tight jersey. I'm like, dude, that's a dude. That's a dude. Anyway. Roy argued there was a breach in the structure set up by House Republicans after the January vote to elect McCarthy as Speaker. He vowed to fight the new compromise bill and, without mentioning the Speaker by name, added, no matter what happens, there is going to be a reckoning. Under a rule McCarthy agreed to in January as a concession to his conservative critics, any one House member can offer a resolution to remove the House Speaker. The deal McCarthy and Biden reached in principle over the weekend would avoid a historic government debt default by raising the nation's debt ceiling for nearly 2 years. Suspending, by the way. Not raising, suspending. No. No suspend. Bad. 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 No. The compromise bill, clocking in at 99 pages long, holds non-defense spending for fiscal year 2024 at roughly current levels and will raise it by 1% in 25. It also sets spending caps. Yeah, we read all this yesterday. One after another, members of the Freedom Caucus at the press conference called on fellow Republicans to oppose the bill. Dan Bishop called the vote on the deal a career-defining vote for every Republican. Later, when asked by reporters if a motion to oust McCarthy over the bill is on the table, Bishop said Bishop was the sole member to raise his hand. So, we will see what happens, and if he stays in. I mean, I'd like to see some of this. And again, personally, I don't really care if the debt ceiling defaults. I am steady in my job. I know how to garden. I know how to preserve food. And I don't need the government or their crony capitalism. I can take care of it on my own. And I hope the rest of you can too, but I also hope that every time you've gone to the store, since I started talking about it, you grabbed a can of Spam or canned chicken or tuna or something that's non-perishable. And those of you who have property plowed an extra line into the garden. Maybe got a hunting permit this time through. Learned how to can something and picked up another skill. So that's what we have for that. From the Daily Wire, band of Republicans stand against the debt ceiling deal. Hey, look, that's the same picture as as NPR used. From Daniel Chayton. As many as 20 House Republicans oppose the deal hashed out between the White House and McCarthy to avoid a U.S. debt default. leading the GOP charge against the compromise, which would suspend the debt limit until January 2025 in exchange for various restraints on spending, was the conservative House Freedom Caucus, which views the agreement as being too watered down. Their opposition, if it holds, means a bipartisan vote will be necessary for passage as Republicans hold a narrow majority in the lower chamber. This deal fails completely. Scott Perry, chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, said at a press conference outside the Capitol on Tuesday. Here's Chip Roy.
Has been torn asunder. And we are working hard to try to put it back together again this weekend by making sure that this bill gets stopped. I want to be very clear. Not one Republican should vote for this deal. Not one. If you're out there watching this, every one of my colleagues, be very clear. Not one Republican should vote for this deal. It is a bad deal. No one sent us here to borrow an additional $4 trillion to get absolutely nothing in return. But at best, if I'm being really generous, a spending freeze for a couple of years. That's it. That's about what you get. And frankly, you're going to make things worse. And my Democratic colleagues know it. That's why they're supporting it. That's why they're going around gleeful. Look, there's a reason our Democrat colleagues support this. There's a reason that Mitt Romney supports this. There's a reason that Bill Kristol supports this. It's all the same stuff. There's a reason that our conservative allies are opposing it roundly. The Club for Growth, scoring against it. The Heritage Foundation, scoring against it. Freedom Works, scoring against it. Ron DeSantis, publicly opposed. President Trump said he thought we should default rather than pursue this kind of lunacy. At the end of the day, the only person that would default in this town is Joe Biden, unless Republicans default on the American dream by voting for this bad bill. That is why this group will oppose it. We will continue to fight it today, tomorrow, and no matter what happens, there's going to be a reckoning about what just occurred unless we stop this bill by tomorrow. I yield to my...
And that, by the way, is it's a good jump on people. Like, it's a good name drop, especially in a contentious Republican primary. When the people who are going to be going home, especially in the House where everybody's up every 2 years, they are going to be backed by one of the two men that Chip Roy mentioned, Trump and DeSantis. And the fact that they're both sitting in the same boat on this piece of crap kind of tells you what these people are going to expect or be expected of when they go home. So, here on that. A third member opposed the deal. Dan Bishop put his fellow GOP colleagues on notice. This is a career-defining vote for every Republican, he said. And again, I said yesterday, this is a very, very Kobayashi Maru moment for the Freedom Caucus and the Republican Party in general. If we get to the default point and we go over, it's because the Republicans, at the behest of the Freedom Caucus, torpedoed this bill. Then they've already got their headlines written. We hit recession, which we are inevitably headed for a recession. We hit recession because evil Donald Trump and evil MAGA let us default on the debt ceiling. That's the reason that we hit. That's why we're going into a recession and a depression, and it's because of evil MAGA. Whereas if they let this thing pass, they have a problem going home with their constituents who are expecting them to actually be fiscally conservative for once in their lives. But Democrats are left holding the bag when the recession hits. This is a very no-win situation. And like I said yesterday, I don't envy House Republicans with this. I don't. Because I don't know what I would do. And I'll be very open about that. I have no idea what I would do. I couldn't even begin to tell you. I want to say that I'd stand strong for my people, but I know that the recession is coming, and I know that I want to see Democrats left holding the bag for it. Yeah, Team Red needs to draft better players, no teamwork. We're staying on the sports theme today, apparently. On a surprising turn of events from the Hill, Massey. Mr. I'm going to walk around with the national debt pin on my lapel says that he plans to help advance the debt limit bill. I hope he's got some strategy, because this is wildly out of character for Thomas Massey. From Michael Schnell. Thomas Massey said Tuesday that he plans to vote for the rule governing debate over the debt limit bill, virtually ensuring the legislation's advancement to the House floor despite conservative opposition. Now again, this is not him saying that he'll vote yes on the bill per se, but he's voting for it to come down to the full floor. Which means I'm thinking he wants some people to have to put their names to it, and to see who will and who won't put their names to it. That's the only strategy I can see from, again, somebody who walks around with a national debt live ticker on his lapel. Massey, a libertarian lawmaker who sits on the House Rules Committee, announced his intent to vote for the rule during the panel's hearing Tuesday. I want to see the rule. It's not printed yet. It's not been read. But I anticipate voting for this rule, he said. When people want to express their ideology, the floor of the House on the actual final passage of the bill is the place to do that. What do the 13 of us owe to the rest of Congress? We owe them an honest shake and a playing field that doesn't change. Attention was focused on the Rules Committee on Tuesday as it debated the debt limit bill crafted by President Brandon and Speaker McCarthy. The legislation raises the debt limit for 2 years, beefs up work requirements for federal public assistance programs, and rescinds billions of dollars in unspent PINKO pox funding, among other provisions. Well, all that's going to do is lead a lot of blue states to try to ramp up their spending to get the rest of their COVID money spent, so they don't have to go give it back up. The legislation has come under criticism from some liberals and conservatives, with Democrats concerned about the number of spending provisions in the measure, and Republicans frustrated that the legislation is not aggressive enough in terms of cutting spending. It's also not the only uphill battle that Democrats have to face, by the way. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Votes in the Rules Committee are typically party line, with the majority party supporting the rule and the minority party voting against it. But if Massey, Norman, and Roy all voted against the rule, the Democrats oppose it as well, which is customary. The bill would be blocked from advancing to the floor. Roy and Norman have both signaled they could vote against the rule in an attempt to block it from reaching the floor. So, again, I see where Massey is going with this, and I understand why. Like, he's not said which way he will vote directly on the bill, but what he has said is that he wants to get people's names to this in a roll call vote. So it's an interesting strategy. We'll see where that goes. Let's grab another one from The Wire. Nancy Mace, liberal Republican Nancy Mace, is a no on debt ceiling deal. Outsmarted by a president who can't find his pants. I hate it when I can't find my pants. A funny story. I had posted back when I still used the Boomer book. It was a job that I was working. It was back in the recession, the last recession, not the one that's coming up. Back in the last recession, I took a temp job at a bus garage. But because they almost exclusively hired by temp agency at that point, like they pulled uniforms for the temps even if you were only going to be there for 90 days. And my uniform showed up, and it was all cool, but I only got shirts. I never got pants. And I posted on the Boomer book, I said, I finally have an opportunity to use the phrase that my roommate, the only phrase my roommate ever knew in Spanish, I finally have an opportunity to use this phrase. ¿Dónde están mis pantalones? If Joe Biden could speak Spanish, he would be saying that every day. From Ben Ziesloft. Nancy Mace announced Tuesday that she would not vote in favor of the debt ceiling deal between President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy, contending that Republicans were hoodwinked. Fair. And the agreement would normalize high spending. Fair. The debt ceiling, a statute established by Congress that prevents the government from spending. And this has been in just about every article that we've read since we started talking about this. Mace, broadly considered a moderate among House Republicans, revealed that she would vote no on the bill because playing the DC game isn't worth selling out our kids and grandkids based. She also said that Republicans were outsmarted by a president who can't find his pants. This deal normalizes record high spending started during the pandemic, she wrote on social media, observing that normative levels of government spending expanded $4 trillion before the recession to $6 trillion in the years after the crisis. It sets these historically high spending levels as the baseline for all future spending. That is a fair assessment. The lawmaker concluded the bill, which was named the Fiscal Responsibility Act, would wash spending-wise, or would be a wash rather spending-wise, since the small cut to discretionary spending would be eclipsed by a large increase in spending elsewhere. The military. The arrangement would claw back some $30 billion in pandemic relief funds, roughly matching $41 billion cut from federal spending in the first year of the bill. Mace also noted that only $1.4 billion of the $80 billion of additional funds recently allocated to the IRS would be removed, while the student debt cancellation plan from the Biden admin would remain intact. Excuse me. Washington is and always will be lousy at responsibly spending your tax dollars, she added. That won't change unless we demand change. So, good on Nancy Mace, actually. Honestly. For as liberal of a Republican as she is, good on her. Absolutely. From the Blaze. And this, by the way, is part of the propaganda that's going to go the other way. But I don't think, and I arranged this in a specific way because I wanted to make sure that this was brought up. So, coming from the Blaze, the White House's secret message to Democrats suggests who actually won the debt ceiling negotiation. I don't know who won the debt ceiling negotiation, but I know who lost the debt ceiling negotiation. We did. The American people. From Chris Enlow. The White House is circulating a private message to Democrats. President Biden actually won the debt ceiling negotiations by keeping most Republican requests out of the agreement. Yeah, this is the same propaganda that came out with JoJo from Joyce. White House officials are selling the agreement to Democrats as one in which Biden successfully staved off the extreme demands of Republicans and one in which Democrats can continue advancing their policy goals, Politico reported. In fact, the White House is celebrating that major social safety spending programs, Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, which, by the way, were guaranteed at the very beginning of this, because Republicans use that as their piggy bank just as much as Democrats do. And Biden's legislative achievements, like the Inflation Production Act, which doesn't actually reduce inflation, and the CHIPS Act, among others, are all being preserved and funded. Well, don't touch your Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but, if we can repeal those two right there, that's a large chunk of money going back against the budget. More from Politico. White House officials argue that spending figures ultimately favor Democrats, even if McCarthy gets to take a victory lap talking about spending cuts. The permitting reforms advance their climate agenda. That's right, according to Politico, the agreement essentially allows McCarthy to declare victory in public, but the real winners are Democrats. It's all propaganda. The reporting aligns with what Biden said after the deal was announced. Asked what he says to his allies that fear he conceded too much ground, the Republicans, Biden responded, They'll find it. I didn't. So, with that being said, and part of the reason, by the way, I don't think Democrats will get on board with this lest they be punished by their own constituents here. NPC News, I should say, which we've got to refresh because dipshit me didn't go back and do this at the beginning of the show. What the debt ceiling deal means for student loan payments and forgiveness. That's right. That's in this bill, which means that they can no longer come back and say, "No, we're still in a financial crisis. We need to keep this suspended. Please vote for us, and we'll keep it suspended forever." From Eric Ortiz. Federal student loan borrowers are facing a reckoning as a result of the tentative debt ceiling deal struck in Washington. If the agreement between the Biden admin and top congressional Republicans is signed into law, payments on federal student loans that were paused at the start of the pandemic will be reinstated at the end of August, and those bills coming due the following month. That means some 43 million borrowers like Daniel Galvin, they've got the tears coming out. Like Daniel Galvin, the 34-year-old from SoCal, must start tightening his household budget amid higher food costs and other unforeseen expenses. Galvin, a university admin who still owes about $10.5 on his student loans, said payments may have stopped over the last 3 years, but his financial obligations only grew. The pause was helpful, he said on Tuesday. My wife and I could buy a house in 2020. The money that would have gone to a loan payment helped me save up for that house and our initial expenses. Now we have 1-year-old twins. They are not cheap. That's your own problem, dude. In March of 2020, then President Trump signed the CARES Act, which allowed federal student loan holders to forego payments without being penalized. President Biden extended the pause as concerns about inflation and rising gas prices continued to sap consumers. Now, that's not true. He extended the pause by still citing the pinko pox pandemic. He never brought up rising inflation and gas prices. Interest was also suspended to the benefit of borrowers. The moratorium, however, did not apply to borrowers with privately held loans. Trust me, I know. Found that out the hard way. Natalia Abrams, the founder of the Student Debt Crisis Center, a nonprofit advocacy group based in LA, criticized the White House for allowing student loan relief to be clawed back, particularly while the Biden admin's larger plan to forgive billions in student loan debt remains in limbo in the Supreme Court. Borrowers got sold out, Abrams said. They feel thrown under the bus with these negotiations. Her concerns, she said, is that the potential for millions of people getting socked with bills they didn't realize are due and can't afford. That would be true for borrowers who graduated in 2020 and have not had to factor in loan payments those past 3 years, she said. It really seems that could punish young folks, said Ro Khanna, a member of the House Progressive Caucus, and it would be, in my view, politically disastrous to force millions of young folks to start paying the student loans when Trump had forgiven them, more or less. Well, again, good luck getting this past the finish line. Because now you've got a poison pill that says that anybody with a D after their name cannot vote for this. Shapiro getting in on this. By the way, I typically, especially when there's something big and legal looming like this, I will hate listen to Shapiro because while he is way too neoconservative for me, for my taste, and thinks that we should spend our entire budget defending Israel, the other side of the coin with Shapiro is that he is a Harvard-educated lawyer, which means that he can offer insights on the legality of things that other commentators cannot, which is, again, a big part of the reason that I do give him attention begrudgingly in situations like this. But I've not had a listen. I am kind of curious at this point. Ben Shapiro reacts to debt limit deal, hits both Democrats and Republicans over spending habits. I can't believe I'm about to say this about Ben Shapiro, but based? Oh, but it's both sides-ism. That's still fucking based. From Ben Ziesloft. Ben Shapiro contended that recent debt ceiling agreement between Biden and McCarthy occurs in the context of both Democrats and Republicans spending far beyond the nation's means. No shit, Sherlock. The debt ceiling, a statute that established by Congress, exceeding predetermined default on loans, McCarthy, and all the stuff we've read already. Republican members from the House from both more moderate and conservative factions, including Mace and Roy, expressed severe reservations. Shapiro commented on the social media that any spending reform which does not significantly amend the welfare system is ultimately inconsequential.
Okay, look, gang, I agree with every single critique of the shortcomings of the debt limit deal. In a rational world, we wouldn't just be fighting over discretionary spending, we'd be restructuring entitlements.
Note, Mr. Shapiro does not talk about the military. Because again, we need to be the defense force for Israel until the end of time, per Ben Shapiro. The best-selling author and podcast host added that the agreement is a failure
Compared to the ideal, and the ideal,
characterizing the compromise between Biden and McCarthy as
a giant bag of failure mixed with heaping helping of bankruptcy.
He said that in comparison to the proposed debt ceiling increase with no spending reforms, however, the deal could be considered a success. Shapiro also noted that many conservatives are more agitated over McCarthy's deal
than they were with the fact that Trump, as president and with full control of Congress, Republicans increased spending.
He contended that
every fiscal debate is basically about where to place the deck of chairs on the Titanic, unless entitlement spending is addressed. Politicians all know this, gang, but they're incentivized to play kabuki theater over the rest of the spending, so to avoid the third rail of American politics. They kick the can down the road, the iceberg is right there, but they're screaming about where the chairs should go, okay, gang? And nobody wants to see the Titanic sink because we're all on the Titanic, and we're all rearranging the deck chairs as we go, and as the ship, that's America, goes down, with an Alzheimer's addled patient running the helm, okay, gang?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ben Shapiro had a point. And it was a good one. What is happening? Alright. So that's where we're at on the debt ceiling. After reading all this, some of this I've read for the first time today, I'm going to up this to 60-40. Fail. What do you guys think? 8 people watching across all the platforms over here. What do you think? What do you think the percentage is that the debt ceiling passes to fails, or fails to pass? What are the odds that this particular one fails and passes? I think, honestly, that they're going to force an emergency all-night session to get a better bill. Let's talk DeSantis. From the Associated Press. DeSantis kicks off presidential campaign in Iowa as he steps up criticisms of Trump. From Hannah Fingerhut, Thomas Beaumont, and Stephen Peoples. Facing Iowa voters for the first time as a presidential candidate. Ron DeSantis launched a multi-state campaign blitz Tuesday designed to strengthen his position as former President Trump's chief Republican rival. That is, of course, after he depended on former President Trump to get to where he is right now. DeSantis was addressing roughly 500 people gathered in suburban Des Moines, the opening appearance in a 3-state tour with 12 scheduled stops over 4 days. He moved to early primary states, New Hampshire and South Carolina, later in the week. The appearance comes 6 days after stumbling online announcement that raised questions about his readiness for the national stage. Beyond the glitchy launch, DeSantis opens his campaign looking up at Trump in the polls amid persistent questions about the Florida governor's ability to connect with voters in person. DeSantis' Tuesday evening stop at Eternity Church in Clive is a conspicuous nod to the evangelical Christians who wield outsized influence in Iowa's Republican presidential caucuses. His visit will give voters an opportunity to meet the new candidate, just as he has been stepping up his criticism of the Donald. He's got a big hill to climb, and I think everyone would agree that to be able to convince people that he can overcome Trump, that he can do a job as good as, if not better than Trump, said Bernie Hayes, Republican chair in Lynn County, where DeSantis plans to wrap up his Iowa jaunt on Wednesday. DeSantis has been assailed by Trump for months, including a new round of fresh attacks this week. Trump's latest shots focused on DeSantis' leadership as Florida governor during the pandemic. The former president wrote on his social media platform that Florida was the third worst state in deaths by COVID. That's not even true. Is it? Maybe deaths with COVID, but keep in mind this is America's retirement home. I think the median age in Florida is like 70. I would have to fact check that statistic, by the way, because I don't know if that's true or not. So why do they say that DeSantis did a good job? New York had fewer deaths, Trump wrote. Meanwhile, a pro-Trump super PAC continued to run ads this week on Iowa television accusing DeSantis of wanting to raise taxes, a charge that DeSantis has denied. I don't think that he wants to, but I think he's going to be forced to, given the fiscal mess that he would inherit. And the inability to pull the private sector up to pull tax receipts. Again, could be wrong. And if DeSantis wins the presidency in 2024 and takes the office in 2025, and I am wrong, I will come out and admit it. Kim Risberg of Dallas Center, Iowa, attended DeSantis' launch with her husband. She voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020, but she said she's not necessarily committed to him this time around. They wanted to attend because they're interested in DeSantis' platform. DeSantis is a little softer, the 59-year-old said, and more appealing to the masses. Since Trump and DeSantis are competing for the same job, she understands it might be a bitter race. But at some point, I would like to see them on the same team. Yes, please. I am sorry if that busted out your ears. I didn't realize I was going to be clapping right in front of the microphone. That is my bad. I apologize. That was a reaction. I apologize. That's the important part. What Kim Risberg said right here, at some point, I would like to see them on the same team. A reminder, and this again is something that I have said before. A big reminder is that if DeSantis wins the nod, somehow, he is going to need Trump supporters to get him the rest of the way through. That's not necessarily a problem for Ron himself. He does appear to be trying to court the Trump loyal to some extent, but his followers, again, are the ones who are coming out and yelling that all the Trump supporters are the suspenders wearing backwards rubes that we all hate. Likewise, if the Donald secures the nomination, he is going to need DeSantis fans to win. He can come out with all kinds of bluster and bravado and say, I can win by myself, okay, I'm doing great, world's greatest president, I've got a job record, and I can just come in here and everybody's going to vote for me, and if they don't vote for me, it's rigged. He can do that all he wants. That doesn't change the fact that you need DeSantis voters to get you over the finish line. So yes, Kim Risberg, we need to see them on the same team. You are absolutely right. And again, the big agreement here is we need to come to the understanding very, 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 very quickly that the Donald, the much, much more liberal, 3 times divorced, not necessarily living an evangelical lifestyle, will need to court these evangelical voters again. Likewise, the evangelical, Bushite, Christian Republicans need to remember that the vast majority of the Trump core support is Reform Democrats, Union Democrats who got passed up by the progressive movement. I will say that every single show until it sinks in. You guys need each other to win, but you need to remember who and what each other are as well. Otherwise, we've got 4 more years of, Jill! Jill, what are all these people in front of me? Hey, you remember Bo? Yeah, I think he was here last week. That's what you have 4 more years of, if you guys can't put your differences aside and come together and figure it out. I will not insult DeSantis fans either. As much as I don't like Ron DeSantis, Governor Executive Order himself, I will not give an insult to his fans. Point blank, period. I'm going to skip this one from the Hill. But I want to talk about the funding changes that Florida's put in place from NBC News. Florida election officials quietly made it easier for Ron DeSantis to fund his 2024 bid. From Matt Dixon. Ron DeSantis' administration has quietly changed the state guidelines, essentially giving its blessing for a state-level political committee he previously ran to move millions of dollars to a super PAC helping his presidential campaign. For years, election officials said such a transfer to federal super PACs would not be allowed, but in March, just months before DeSantis formally launched his bid for president, officials at the Florida State Department, the DeSantis admin entity that regulates state elections, changed its handbook to assert that such moves are allowed. The timing is notable because the state-level political committee DeSantis led for the past 5 years, known as Friends of Ron DeSantis, is widely expected to transfer $80 billion to a federal super PAC called Never Back Down that's supporting his just-launched bid for president. Going back to at least the 2016 election cycle, the handbook made it clear that state election regulators did not think transferring money from state to federal committees was allowable. The issue was addressed in every election cycle in the handbook's frequently asked questions section. No read the past handbooks in response to the hypothetical questions about the state to federal transfers. A Florida political committee must use its funds solely for Florida political activities, i.e., depositing contributions and making expenditures, which by definition in Florida law are for the purposes of influencing only Florida elections. For the next 4 versions of the handbook covering 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022, an identical answer was given. In the 24 version, published in March, however, the answer changed. It now advises that such transfers are allowed, citing the U.S. Supreme Court's 2010 Citizens United ruling, in which the court removed a ban on corporations and unions making independent expenditures that paved way for super PACs like Never Back Down, which is expected to spend upwards of $200 million helping DeSantis try to win the White House. A Florida political committee may make contributions to an out-of-state political entity that engages solely in non-coordinated expenditures, reads the updated answer, using a wonky election term for super PACs which cannot directly coordinate with candidate campaigns they are helping. So, they're getting the big bucks. But then again, I mean, it's all a slush fund. Think about Act Blue for just a second. And, by the way, win red as well. The Republicans' answer to Act Blue, which is probably going to be cited this election cycle as somehow illegal, while Act Blue gets to remain strong. We will see. Speaking of Never Back Down, something that actually started a little bit of contention before we got started with one of our more conservative members of Twitter in my state, who had retweeted this. saying Never Back Down has such an impressive ground game that DeSantis Super PAC has hired enough people to knock on every door of every potential voter in the Republican primaries 4 times. I guarantee they won't be coming here 4 times. I can tell you that. Because the first one will come to my door and I will say, SB 269, get the hell out of here. And when the Trump people come and knock on the door, it'll be, hey, how many omnibuses did you sign versus how many did you say you were never going to sign again? By the way, the answer is 3. Get the fuck out of here. But let's listen to what Never Back Down has to say.
Regarding the state of Iowa, where Ron DeSantis is starting his day today, his super PAC called Never Back Down has been running ads in Iowa already. And they've got such an impressive ground game because, as we told you midweek, the New York Times had been briefed on what the ground game was going to look like. And in the first 4 states that hold votes, it sounds like the DeSantis super PAC has hired enough people to knock on every door of every potential voter in the Republican primaries 4 times, just to make sure that the message gets out. Remember, back in the day, 2016, Donald Trump actually lost in Iowa, and the campaign, was pretty much flying by the seat of his pants. Now they've got more money. The big question is, how are they going to use it to fend off Ron DeSantis, who's going to do his best today with his Great American Comeback Tour to catch up? Regarding the state of Iowa.
Well, we will see. Biden, overconfident, as usual, before we get into talk about Biden's own legal troubles. From Insider. Biden laughed when asked about Ron DeSantis claiming he might pardon Trump if elected president. From Kelsey Vlamis. I still think that's an underhanded dig at President Trump, by the way. Because remember what Democrats said, well, only guilty people need a pardon. Which is not true, by the way. People who were politically persecuted may also need a pardon. This is from Kelsey Vlamis over at Insider. When asked for comment on presidents pardoning Donald Trump after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suggested he could do just that, President Biden just laughed, partially because he doesn't remember what a pardon is. Did you see that Ron DeSantis said that if he became president, he would pardon Trump? What's your idea on presidents pardoning Trump? A reporter asked Biden on Monday, video showed. Biden, appearing amused by the question, chuckled, raised his hand in dismissal, and turned to walk away. One time I met a girl who sang the blues, and I asked her for some happy news. But she also just turned and walked away. DeSantis, who officially announced last week he is running for president in 2024, was asked on a conservative podcast whether or not he would consider pardons for Capitol rioters, something that Trump has already promised. A big part of being president is pardon powers. Do you think the January 6th defendants deserve to have their cases examined by Republican President Clay Travis of the Clay and Buck show, asked DeSantis? And if Trump, let's say, gets charged with federal offenses and you are the president of the U.S., would you look at potentially pardoning Trump himself based on the evidence that might emerge of those charges? DeSantis did not dismiss the notion and indicated that pardons for rioters and Trump would be on the table. Again, and I think that Donald himself knocked it out of the park. They were trying to put him in a trap and saying that, he's just throwing... He's defending his insurrectionists. They were trying to set a trap for him at the town hall, in which he answered perfectly and said, "Okay, now, what's going to happen here is I'm going to review all the cases one by one and decide who needs to be pardoned, and the ones who need to be pardoned are going to be pardoned. But some of the violent individuals up at the front are probably not going to be pardoned." And I would think that, DeSantis is probably not going to come back out and say, Well, I'm just going to go back and pardon all these people, but, I got to review the cases and everything, too. All right, speaking of Biden, shot and then chaser from the Daily Mail for the shot. FBI has 1 day to turn over documents linking Joe Biden to an alleged $5 million bribery scheme with a foreign national or else face contempt of Congress proceedings, investigating Republicans to have call with FBI director this week. This is from Kelly Lacko for DailyMail.com. The female body inspectors, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, has one, you can see where my mistake might have been, has 1 day to turn over an internal document that Republicans claim shows President Biden was involved in a $5 million criminal scheme with a foreign national or else contempt of Congress proceedings will begin. The internal unclassified FD 1023 form apparently details an arrangement for an exchange of money for policy decisions, the Republicans have said, and issued a subpoena for last month. There's a black pill right there in the chat. Silentcaster says Biden knows Republicans are hopeless for 2024. Honk honk. FBI Director Wray was given a hard deadline of May 30th to hand over the unclassified FD 1023 document, or the House Oversight Committee, led by James Comer, said it will initiate contempt of Congress proceedings. Which, by the way, that's today. Comer and Grassley are also set to have a phone call with Wray on Wednesday, a spokesperson confirmed to DailyMail.com, but the lawmakers have indicated that it's unlikely the Bureau's top brass will hand over the document. Last week, Comer informed Wray that he was also narrowing the breadth of the subpoena for the document by providing 2 additional terms that may be referenced in the record, June 30th, 2020 and $5 million. The FBI's mission is to protect American people. Releasing confidential source information could be potentially jeopardizing the investigations and put lives at risk, the FBI told DailyMail.com last week in a statement regarding whether it will turn over the FD 1023 form. But this is a declassified document, which means it's not a confidential source of information because it's a declassified document. Well, they're both lied about being a vaccine salesman. The FBI remains committed to cooperating with Congress's oversight requests on this matter and others, as we always have. Well, they're in contempt. Here's your chaser from the Daily Wire. Comer says FBI defied subpoena, will move forward with contempt. From Daniel Chayton. House Oversight Chairman Jimmy Comer announced Tuesday he will move forward with holding FBI Director Wray in contempt of Congress. The top GOP lawmaker announced in an afternoon statement that the Bureau failed to comply with the subpoena request by documentation believed to contain allegations of a criminal bribery scheme involving President Brandon. Today, the FBI informed the committee it will not provide the unclassified documents subpoenaed by the committee. Comer said the FBI's decision to stiff-arm Congress and hide this information from the American people is obstructionist and unacceptable. Though Comer noted he has a call with Wray scheduled for Wednesday, the chairman stressed the House Oversight Committee has been clear in its intent to protect congressional oversight authorities and will now be taking steps to hold the FBI director in contempt for refusing to comply with a lawful subpoena. The chairman said whistleblower disclosures led him and Chuck Grassley to believe the Department of Justice and FBI have an unclassified FD 1023 form describing the alleged scheme involving Biden dating back to his time as vice president, and a foreign national. Comer initially sent a subpoena on May 3rd with a May 10th deadline, but later extended it to Tuesday. I mean, after he was President, Biden could say all he could say was get vaccinated for all of 2021. I'm telling you, man, that there's no excuse, man. Come on, it's free. I'd still like to see the invoice that Pfizer sent over to the government for all those free vaccines, by the way. Now, does contempt of Congress mean anything? I believe it means a fine, and I don't think much of anything else. Because during the January 6th riots, or the hearings for the January 6th riots, I should say, we had a lot of contempt of Congress being thrown around, and, I don't remember, well, no, never mind, Bannon did go to jail, but, I mean, with the DOJ being led by Merrick Garland, who's actually going to enforce any of this anyway? So, it's all political, it's all for show. But that's where we're at for that. Let's grab one from CNN. Texas House of Representatives votes to impeach AG Paxton. From Eric Bradner, Zoe Sotil, and Andy Rose. So I'm going to go message Sewell. This is his neck of the woods. The Texas House has voted to impeach A.G. Paxton, an unprecedented move following a legislative probe that faulted the third-term Republican for a years-long pattern of corruption, including abusing his office powers, retaliating against whistleblowers, and obstructing justice. Under state law, Paxton is now temporarily suspended from his duties as AG and will await a Senate trial. The vote was 121-23 with 2 members voting present. Yeah, he gone. The evidence is substantial. It is alarming and unnerving, said Rep. Andy Murr, chair of the General Investigating Committee, during his closing statement following hours of debate. The committee recommended 20 counts of impeachment against Paxton. Democrat Rep. Harold Dutton was one of the members voting present. He said impeachment vote had been rushed. The process by which we're getting this done seems to be abbreviated to the point that it just encroaches on due process, said Dutton. Paxton denied wrongdoing in a Friday news conference, but focused his statements against the impeachment this week. On his record as a key opponent of President Biden, Paxton's office has filed dozens of lawsuits against the Biden admin. Marjorie Taylor... No, hold on, we gotta do MTG voice for that one. Marjorie Taylor Greene is pleased. Much impeachment I sense in them, she was quoted. The now suspended AG called the impeachment a politically motivated sham in a statement just minutes after the vote. The ugly spectacle in the Texas House today confirmed the outrageous impeachment plot against me was never meant to be fair or just, he said. Paxton said he was never given a chance to present evidence refuting the findings of an investigation that he abused his office. Well, I think that's what the trial is for. He has cast House Speaker Dade Phelan, a Republican who presides over a chamber where his party currently holds an 85 seats to Democrats 64, as a liberal. He continued his attack on Phelan, saying Phelan's coalition of Democrats and liberal Republicans is now in lockstep with the Biden admin, the abortion industry, anti-gun zealots, and woke corporations. So, I've not read the articles of impeachment that are against Paxton at this point. I don't want to say whether or not I think that he's innocent or guilty. But again, if he is guilty, and they can prove that beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt, then yes, he needs to be removed. The corruption on both sides needs to be taken out. It's not about we've got to keep his seat because otherwise the Democrats win. No. If he has actually done this, give him a chance to present his side of the story, and if the evidence stacks up, he's gone. Let's grab another one from our friends over at NPR. Actually, I'm going to skip this one because this looks like this is going to be the same information. But let's pull the Donald into this one here. Instead of going to NPR, let's go to the USA Today. Trump fought to save Texas ally Ken Paxton from impeachment. It didn't work. Because now that he's been impeached for corruption, now they have to go tie him to Trump. Which, he was a Trump ally, don't get me wrong, but now the USA Today has to go tie the two of them together. From John Fritza. In the hours before the GOP-controlled legislature in Texas voted to impeach A.G. Paxton, over the weekend, former President Trump repeatedly took to social media with a warning for anyone, especially members of his own party, who opposed his longtime ally. Trump lamented what he called a very unfair process, used out one of the nation's most active state legal officials, and vowed that he would fight any lawmakers who supported the impeachment. In the end, a majority of Texas Republicans in the state's House ignored the admonishments of a former president and party leader and voted overwhelmingly to impeach Paxton anyway. Of 85 Republicans in the chamber, 60 supported Paxton's impeachment. The decision by many Republicans to wave off Trump's warning fueled questions about the former president's political power in one of the nation's reddest states. The episode comes as the field of candidates entering the race to challenge Trump for the 2024 nomination grows. Again, my big thing with that is I don't necessarily care who supports him at this point. USA Today is trying to tie the two together because once Paxton is out, if he does get ousted, then we come out and hear this Trump ally Paxton is ousted, which means that Trump must be corrupt himself as well. And honestly, if I was the Donald, I would have stayed out of it. Again, I'm not going to issue a judgment on what Paxton did until I've been able to read the articles, number one, and see the evidence and the defense. Let's jump over across the ocean. Let's grab one from CNN. Drone strikes in capital bring Ukraine war to Russia. Why did I put this on the top? I don't want to put this one on the top. I want this one on the top. In fact, I wanted this one closer to the bottom. I don't know, I wasn't thinking clearly when I started this all out. So let's start with NBC instead. Blast hits central Kiev as Russia launches rare daytime attack. So this is actually getting volleyed both directions to both capitals. Which is interesting because just a couple days ago, Clown World had circulated a video of a bunch of people sitting in peace in the middle of Kiev. And I had said at the time that this doesn't necessarily mean that we're not being hoodwinked. We are being hoodwinked, but the evidence of people just sitting peacefully in a McDonald's isn't evidence that we're being hoodwinked. Because at that time that I said that, this was on Sunday, this past Sunday, at that time, the majority of the fighting was being done in the Donetsk regions, without much bombing going on in Kiev. So yes, plenty of people could be out there sitting and enjoying a Big Mac without much of a problem, going on with their lives while people are fighting tooth and nail over the Donetsk region. But let's read here from NBC News. Darina Meyer and Yulia Talmazan. Air raid sirens wailed. Residents rushed to bomb shelters and explosions rocked buildings in Kiev on Monday amid an intensifying Russian assault on the Ukraine's capital. The wave of powerful explosions struck central Kiev around 11:30 a.m. local time, shortly after an air alert sounded through the capital, leaving little time for residents to find safety. NBC News staffers in the city heard the series of loud blasts that hit one after another, rattling windows and glass in buildings in the center of the capital. Video shared by journalist Liz Cookman on Twitter showed children running through the street and screaming during the morning explosions. Debris that fell in the Podil district caused a small fire, she said. Hey, look, I can use Twitter for reporting. I don't know why I don't have a tracking bar on that, but we'll go with that for right now. Yeah, there's the explosion in the background, which sounds like it came from behind the person making the shot. Oh, now I have a tracking bar. The commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Valery Zaluzhny, said that 11 land-based ballistic missiles were launched at the Kiev region. All were shot down, he said. The Russian Defense Ministry said Monday its forces carried out a mass strike with long-range precision-guided air-launched weapons on Ukrainian airfields. It did not address the strikes on Kiev directly. False flag? Maybe. I'm going to need to see a little bit more evidence before I attribute this directly to one side or the other, or us, for that matter. Debris from intercepted missiles fell in Kiev's central and northern districts, landing on roads and parks, the Kiev military admin said. At least one civilian was injured, it added. No deaths, one injured. The daytime attack intensified the sense of unease among residents, who were already under strain after weeks of nearly daily nighttime attacks by Russian drones and missiles. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said that it was another difficult night for the capital, but that no one had been killed and that no buildings had been damaged or destroyed. 6 hours earlier, defenses brought down more than 40 targets as Russian forces bombarded Kiev with a combination of drones and cruise missiles, said Sergei Popko, the head of Kiev's military admin. The Kiev military admin said after the daytime strike was the 16th attack on the capital this month. After long, exclusively nighttime attacks, the enemy struck a peaceful city during the day when most of the residents were at work and on the streets, it said in a post on the Telegram messaging app. That, by the way, used to be only used for Nazis. Many took shelter in nearby subway stations. The central station, Palat Sport 2, was crowded with residents looking for safety. After the sirens began sounding, Kiev resident Anastasia Garabetska said. Garabetska and her daughter Hannah, who turned 5 on Sunday. That was so editorialized. Have been spending many nights in the station hiding from nighttime attacks in the city. Hannah sleeps in her clothes and knows the drill for running towards the nearest subway station when the siren sounds, her mother said. But Monday's strike caught her off guard, said Garabetska, who works as a designer. It's really scary. It is a kind of animal fear, she said, speaking on the phone from the capital. My child is very afraid of loud sounds. She sees fear in our eyes as well. She sometimes imagines sirens too, and she always asks why they want to kill us. I have no answer for her. Kiev authorities said that more than 41,000 people were taking refuge in the subways during the daytime shelling. Amazing, by the way. Amazing timing. Just as we get towards the end of the negotiating on the debt deal, and need to start thinking about the next military aid package to Ukraine, they start shelling the city. Ain't that the coinkiest to the goddamn dinks? But this is also going the other way. I'm going to grab one here quick before this, talking about what's happening in the Ukraine. CNN with some video here for us. Drones struck at Kiev amid speculation about counteroffensive. Let's watch this one quick.
Officials in Ukraine's capital say at least one person was killed and another one wounded in the latest Russian drone strike on Kyiv. The city's mayor says falling debris damaged buildings and caused fires. Ukraine's Air Force says it shot down more than 50 Iranian-made drones overnight. Ukraine also reported multiple blasts in the occupied cities of Mariupol and Berdyansk on Saturday, while Russian missiles and artillery hit the Kharkiv and Zaporizhia regions. It all happened just hours after Ukraine's top general posted a new video apparently dropping a strong hint about Ukraine's expected counteroffensive. Fred Plykin reports.
Certainly a pretty remarkable video that was put forward by Ukraine's top general, Valery Zaluzhny. It seems to show Ukrainian soldiers getting ready for battle and saying it's time to take back what is ours. Now, in the video, what you also see is them showing a lot of Western-supplied military equipment. It ranges from U.S.-supplied howitzers to HIMARS multiple rocket launching system, but also German-supplied Leopard 2 main battle tanks, which many believe are going to be a key element once the Ukrainians start a counteroffensive that has been looming for a while. Now, it's unclear whether or not this could be an indication that that counteroffensive could be on the horizon, could be inching closer. But one of the things that we are seeing is that there do seem to be an increased number of long-distance strikes, possibly by the Ukrainians on the rear echelon of the Russians. Now, those are focusing essentially on two places. One of them is Berdyansk on the Azov Sea, and the other is Mariupol, which of course is also a major port town on the Azov Sea as well. In fact, there are reports of 3 explosions, at least, in Mariupol on Saturday. Mariupol is one of the main staging grounds for the Russian military for their operations in Ukraine. So that certainly could be a big blow to the Russians if the Ukrainians are indeed hitting that area. The Russians, for their part, are saying that they have intercepted some Ukrainian drones and some Ukrainian missiles as well. They were also talking about intercepting 2 Storm Shadow missiles, which of course were supplied by the United Kingdom. It's unclear whether or not that is true, but it certainly does seem as though right now the Russians in that part of Ukraine seem to be under a considerable amount of pressure.
All right, so, and a little bit, we got to get the map out for this one because our libertarian friends tell us we can't talk about anything unless we can point to it on the map. So let's get the map of Ukraine up, and we'll be referencing this when we talk about what's happening in Russia proper as well. But as was pointed out, the majority of these strikes coming back from the Ukraine, in what they're telling us about anyway, because that's part of the propaganda and the lies by omission and the lies by structure, but are going down towards Mariupol, which is currently in annexed territory. It currently, even though the Google map doesn't show it, the annexation line, I believe, comes from Kharkiv down to Melitopol, which means that technically right now Mariupol is in Russian territory, and Russia is using that as a staging ground to go back and take the rest of its offensives. As far as Kiev goes, again, I have enough concern about what's happening there without coming back and talking about could we have been involved in what's happening in Kiev to try to drum up an amount of support for the war effort going back in. I don't know. I have a really hard time trusting both sides of this. But I do know, as we'll see here coming up in just a moment, that we are now starting to send, well, they are starting to send offensives into Moscow, which means this is no longer a defensive territory war. This is with sanctions, I'm not sorry, from sanctions, with the excuse me, I have the hiccups now. With the blessing of the United States, we now have offensives going in to the territory of Russia, and not just a little ways either, if they're going all the way to Moscow. Where they're getting the fuel and the ability to fly these drones all the way back to Moscow, I don't know. Well, I do know they're coming from us, but I do question this as well. But let's read from the Washington Post. Where democracy goes to die in darkness. Drones hit Moscow, shocking Russian capital after new missile attacks in Kiev. From Isobel Koshiu, Samantha Schmidt, and Francesca Ebel. A drone attack hit Moscow on Tuesday morning, damaging 2 residential buildings, the first strike in a civilian area in the Russian capital since President Putin launched the brutal invasion of Ukraine more than a year ago. It was almost certainly a prelude to a major escalation in hostilities. The drone attack, which was confirmed by Mayor Sergei Sobyanin, occurred just hours after yet another barrage of Russian airstrikes on Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, which killed at least 1 person and injured more than a dozen. Kiev has been under a relentless assault of near nightly bombings in recent weeks, with Moscow seemingly intent on weakening or destroying Ukraine's air defenses ahead of a much-anticipated counteroffensive that Zelensky said he will oust the Russian invaders from Ukraine's territory. While Ukraine denied involvement in the drone strikes in Moscow, the dueling strikes in the capital cities appeared to mark a threshold moment, as residents of Russia's capital experienced direct consequences of their... Oh my god. Oh, the editorialization is constant. They do this all the goddamn time. Direct consequences of the nation's brutal hostilities for the first time. Who reads this drivel? I mean, to be fair, we're reading it right now, but... Oh, well, I just got the 15% warning on my phone, so we've actually got to power down the Instagram feed, so thank you everybody who watched over there, however briefly. Remember, if you're watching this on the replay, you can go ahead and join us on the YouTube channel in the description above, but we're going to take off from there, or my phone dies. Alright, they're gone. We can talk about them. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to Zelensky, said Moscow residents deserved whatever came at them. I'm going to say paradoxical things and you can then analyze. First, undoubtedly, gradually Moscow is starting to sink into fog of war. With very desired sensation, Podolyak said Tuesday morning during Breakfast Show, a Ukrainian-Russian language YouTube program. Of course, we want those people who wanted to start this big European war to feel what it's like to live in state of danger. Yeah, but the innocents in Moscow didn't want to start this war. In fact, they were protesting against it. You know, like Democrats used to do in this country. And of course, all terrible men who sat in parliament and threatened everyone. They are going to gradually receive all of that back. Dude. Podolyak? I'm going to give you a nickel's worth of free advice here. You have a lot of depleted U.S. arms at your disposal right now. You have whipped your country into a frenzy of trying to support your offensive and your defensive. But no matter how much this country gives out to you, you do not have the equipment or men to back up what it is that you're saying. Do not let your mouth write a check that your people's asses cannot cash. I mean, I can pretty much already tell that you're a Bushite anyway. But no, you do not need to go and I mean, these are people's lives that you're screwing around with. Not just the innocents again in Moscow, many of whom protested against the invasion of Ukraine, but on top of that, the people of your country. This is not a video game. You cannot just keep throwing bodies at this thing. You are eventually going to run out of bodies. In early May, 2 drones were intercepted over the Kremlin in an unsuccessful attack that Moscow blamed on Ukraine and claimed it was an attempt to assassinate Putin. He was not in the building at the time. So, generals gathered in their masses just like witches at black masses, apparently. Yeah, exactly. Mogwai says, some of you will die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. That was a quote from the great General Zap Brannigan. We've got another CNN video here. Analysis, drone strikes in capital bring Ukraine war to Russia. From Nathan Hodge. It's a familiar routine for Ukrainians. Explosions ring out in the city, then videos emerge of drones overhead, air defense spring into action, and authorities put out preliminary statements confirming a strike. But this time the shattered glass and concrete is in the Russian capital, not Kiev. Russia's war on Ukraine, it seems, has come home to Moscow. Here's what we know so far. On Tuesday morning, a wave of drone strikes hit the Russian capital, according to the state news agency RAA Novosti. One unmanned aerial vehicle struck the upper floors of a residential high-rise in southwestern Moscow, damaging the facade of the building. Another hit a flat on the 14th floor of an apartment building on Leninsky Prospect, one of the city's main arteries. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin gave updates on Telegram, telling residents that emergency services were on the scene and that 2 people were injured, with none hospitalized. A few hours later, Sobyanin said residents evacuated from the apartment buildings hit by the drones were returning home. But it's unlikely that Moscow can return to its uneasy status quo of life during the Kremlin euphemistically referring to as a special military operation in Ukraine. Since Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion of the Ukraine in February of last year, most of the Russia has been spared the kinds of scenes that Ukrainians routinely endure. There is so much editorialization here too. It's sickening. And again, I don't 100% buy that it was Ukraine launching this into Moscow. Let's pull the map out one more time. Closest point from the Ukraine to Moscow is on this coastal area right here, which is coming out of what appears to be a national forest, a national park. But other than that, you've got a series of small villages and what appears to be a farming community of sorts, without a lot of roads going into it, but other than the T-1908 coming up through Lizny, Liut, Styahavlika, Livka, and places like that. But even then still, if we pan this out and use our 100 miles as a reference, you're still 500 miles plus from the closest point in Ukraine to Moscow. I understand we're giving them our tech, but have we really given them the tech of a drone that'll go 500 miles without a refuel? Because I don't necessarily believe that. And I do question the origins of this. Not again because I don't think that Zelensky is capable of doing this psychologically, That's just logistically a really, 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 really long distance for 2 generations old American tech. That's Army surplus at this point. I have questions, is what I'm saying with this. So we'll see what shakes out with this. I'm genuinely curious. Let's talk a bit about Kosovo. Also popping off right here from Reuters. NATO soldiers deploy in Kosovo clashes with Serb protesters from Patos Bitaisi. NATO peacekeeping soldiers formed security cordons around 3 town halls in Kosovo on Monday as police clashed with Serb protesters while Serbia's president put the army on the highest level of combat alert. The tense situation developed after the ethnic Albanian mayors took office in northern Kosovo's majority area after elections in the Serbs boycotted. In Zvekan, one of the towns, Kosovo police, staffed by ethnic Albanians after Serbs quit the force last year, sprayed pepper gas to repel a crowd of Serbs who broke through a security barricade and tried to force their way into the municipality buildings. Witnesses said Serb protesters in Zvekan threw tear gas and stun grenades at NATO soldiers. Why do Serb protesters have tear gas and stun grenades? Serbs also clashed with the police in Zvekan and spray-painted NATO vehicles with the letter Z, referring to a Russian sign used in war in Ukraine. Oh, jeez. In Leposavic, close to the border with Serbia, U.S. peacekeeping troops in riot gear placed barbed wire around the town hall to protect it from hundreds of angry Serbs. Later in the day, protesters threw eggs at a parked car belonging to the new Leposavic mayor. President Alexander Vučić, who is the commander-in-chief of the Serbian Armed Forces, raised the army's combat readiness to the highest level, Defense Minister Milos Vučević told reporters. This implies that immediately before 2 p.m., 12 GMT, the Serbian Armed Forces Chief of the General Staff issued an additional instruction for the deployment of the Army's units in specific designated positions, Vučević said without elaborating. NATO peacekeepers also blocked off the town hall in Zubin Potok to protect it from angry local Serbs, witnesses said. Igor Simic, deputy head of the Serb List, the biggest Belgrade-backed Kosovo Serb party, accused Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti of fueling tensions in the north. So this is popping off. Let's pull the map out here just to kind of get an idea where this is going. So this is down in Serbia, where there is a disputed border coming out of here right next to Albania. And it does appear that what we're seeing here, Leposavic, there's one right there that we were just talking about, does involve where the border is going to ultimately wind up being placed with Kosovo, which is why it's contested right now. So I mean, to me, it's still, I still look at this and think to myself, man, this didn't pop off for like 4 years. What happened? And the next question is going to be, are we also going to start sending millions upon millions of dollars and surplus weapons and a number of other things that our defense contractors are going to have to replace at a premium price going into, I don't even know which side we're on this one. I think we're on the Serbian side, if I remember correctly. But it has been a while since we've had to have a conversation about this particular region. Mexico also getting into it from Fox News. And we will be powering down probably in just a bit. We'll probably do the MAGA Supreme Court thing. And then we'll have 2 left over for tomorrow. You know what? No. We're not going to do this one. We'll do the Mexican president one, and then we're going to jump ahead to the last one that I have here. And then we'll do rules of acquisition and head out of here for the day. From Fox News, though, Mexican president ramps up anti-Republican rhetoric, urges Hispanics not to give DeSantis any votes. So, I am pretty positive that the vast majority of people coming through Mexico are coming through Mexico, not from Mexico. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but all that we've heard about all summer and over the last 2 years is the people coming from the Northern Triangle. Guatemala, El Salvador, Haiti in some cases, even though that's an island coming across. But we're hearing about all these other Hispanic nations, Venezuelans, Brazilians at points, coming to the national border. We never hear about the actual Mexicans. So my big question here is, what kind of sway does the Mexican president actually have over these people to begin with? Because it doesn't seem like he has any jurisdiction here. But we will read from Adam Shaw. Mexican President Andres Manuel López Obrador again waded into U.S. political situation on Thursday when he urged Hispanics not to vote for newly declared presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, partially because he will lose his political relief valve if DeSantis comes in with his hardline. We're going to build a wall, but it's going to be better than the Trump wall, and we're gonna put more and more troops down on the border to make sure none of this ever goes wrong again and not one person ever gets across again. You know, López Obrador loses his political relief valve at that point. López Obrador spoke at a press conference a day after DeSantis declared his candidacy for the Republican nomination for president in 2024. DeSantis has taken a hard stance against illegal immigration and has called for greater security at the border, including shutting down the border with Mexico. López Obrador accused DeSantis of pushing anti-immigrant policies and urged Hispanics not to vote for him. Again, only a problem if your only concern is losing your political dissidents. Because under any other circumstance, you wouldn't want to lose your citizenry to another country. You want to build a great enough country that people want to come and emigrate to your country. It's a good point that Razorfist made in his Why We Need a Wall rant all the way back at the beginning of the Trump presidency. And that is, too, the U.S. southern border is a political relief valve, and Mexico really is in need of a revolution. I hope the Hispanics of Florida wake up and don't give him any votes, that they don't vote for those who persecute migrants, those who don't respect migrants, he said according to The Guardian. Oh, DeSantis has a lot of respect for migrants who have gone through the process and become naturalized citizens or even legal migrants with work visas. He's got a ton of respect for those people. But see, it's another thing. López Obrador going along with the Democrat line and saying that anybody who is a migrant is exactly the same as somebody who just jumped the border last week. The remarks are the latest instance of meddling in U.S. elections by the unpredictable Mexican premier, who has fumed at Republicans' criticism of the handling of immigration and the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. Well, I mean, he probably doesn't want it to stay down there where it kills his people, the ones who stay, at least. The ones who still support him, if you will. In March, he threatened to launch an information campaign against Republicans, telling Hispanics not to vote for them, after lawmakers suggested potential military action to take out the drug cartels, pumping out fentanyl and sending it to the U.S. Ah, yes, Lindsey Graham. who has never seen a military action that he doesn't like. And I don't think that sending our military into another country to fight the war on drugs is the right way to go. Let Mexico deal with its drug problem. If you've got to do something on the war on drugs, you have your military. Use it to keep it from coming into this country. But what Obrador does in his country is his own business. How he deals with fentanyl in his own country, that's between him and the drug lords. That is not our business. It is not our business until it hits that border. So that is where they are at for that. And we will do one more, and we will head out of here for the day. And that is, of course, anything that goes against the Democrat narrative is literally terrorism. MSDNC guest says Target boycotts are literally terrorism. From Virginia Kruta. An MSDNC guest claimed that boycott threats against major retailers like Target amounted to literal economic terrorism. Okay, what is it when your people do it? What is it when your people come out here and release the list of all the companies that donated to the Trump campaign? Is that economic terrorism? Let's watch.
When Target caves into this, then it says that the moment you threaten the employees of even a very large corporation, you get to control its policies. This is...
Which is what Democrats have been doing for 45 years.
Is economic terrorism, literally terrorism, creating fear among the workers and forcing the corporations to sell the things you want and not sell the things you don't. So,
which is what Democrats have been doing for 45 years. Look, again, and I will point out my stance on boycott. There are certain companies that I will not buy from, but I will not push for an organized boycott of any company. Yes, that includes Target, by the way. Right now, I will not shop at Target, even though they are coming back out and doing the right thing at this point. I still don't believe that it's right for me to come back and shop at Target right now. But I will also not shop at Walmart or buy from Burger King. I've yet to see what's happening with Kohl's, and maybe changing my relationship with them at some point here. But my stance on boycotts remains strong. A Democrat boycott is, just like this guy said, an economic terrorist act to come back and try to force a company into its agenda, just like a Republican boycott. But a reminder that if you boycott everything that disagrees with you even a little bit, you will starve to death. If you boycott everything that does not come out and align with your beliefs perfectly, if you boycott any company that does one thing that you disagree with, you will starve to death. That is something to keep in mind, and I'm not going to tell you where to shop and where not to shop. I will tell you where I shop and don't shop. But there are a few where I've looked back and said, okay, I will take the good with the bad and continue to shop there. Ben & Jerry's I will not buy. Plain and simple. Because they got entirely too preachy on absolutely everything. Burger King got entirely too preachy. And that was a hard one because I love Burger King. Burger King is one of my favorite fast foods. But they are so preachy that I can't do it. And by the way, there's one that's coming up, sneak preview on things I like and things that I hate. One of my favorite bands jumped into the political fray. Which really, really makes me sad because, honestly, the fact that they were staying out of the political fray for as long as they did was one of the things that gave me hope that they were out there for everybody. It was the same thing with like Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is yet to weigh in on politics. I understand that she has some disdain for Trump himself, but has not told people what or what not to do yet at this point, in spite of having pressure put on her to do exactly that. She's made her opinion clear, but again, has not pushed people to come back out and to bully others into getting the political outcomes that she wants, which would stand against her entire brand. And I do like Lady Gaga, by the way. But, and again, sneak peek for what's coming up on Thursday. Paramore jumped into the fray, and I am sad, because I love Paramore's music. Some of my favorite songs to play on guitar are Paramore songs. And I don't even like Ron DeSantis. And the fact that they're coming out here and telling their people how to vote or how not to vote. That just pisses me off. Weigh your own opinion, but, you know, if you're making threats to your fans of, if you vote, again, we're going off into a tangent for things that should be saved till Thursday, but telling your fans that if you vote for a certain way that you're dead to me, that is a bridge too far for me. All right. That is what we have for the news today. It's Tuesday night, which means that we close the night with the Ferengi Rules of Acquisition. So let's look at our rule of acquisition for the week. The Ferengi religion involves being capitalistic to a fault sometimes. But in doing so, if you can keep these 400 rules of acquisition, then you can enter the divine treasury at the end of life and bid on a new life. Keeping these rules gives you the credits that you take into the divine treasury, and while I think that most of us here are Christian and we don't believe in the divine treasury, I do want you guys to have the opportunity, if we are wrong, to go back and bid on that new life at the end of your lives. So, we looked at the 193rd rule of acquisition from Star Trek Online, which most people consider to be non-canon. But there is also a canonical version of the 193rd rule of acquisition that's completely different. And that is, it is never too late to fire the staff. This is from a DS9 novel, Cathedral. It's an interesting point because one thing to look at is that part of the reason that you went into business is because you wanted to provide opportunity for other people. Of course, you wanted to make money, but you also wanted to stimulate the economy and at some point go back and make lives better for other people as well. Give people the opportunity to work, do business, and earn capital that they can next take forward. Work, maybe make their own business, and keep the cycle going and hire people. But also get some people in so that you don't have to do literally all the work. It's part of the way that I want to go with Turns of Pages Productions. Get some more people in here, let them put out the content, get some people writing, and get some people out here getting this webpage up and going. Updates coming to that in the very, very near future. But also keep in mind, it's never too late to fire the staff if they are coming up, if they're starting to uprise, if they think that they can run the company better, or want to take over what it is that you work so hard for. It's one of the union things that comes up here. And again, I am in no way opposed to people coming together and threatening to walk out together to get an outcome from a business leader who is treating them like garbage. But the corporate unions, you guys know that I'm not a big one for them. A couple guys pulling some money together, that's the American dream. A corporation coming in and saying, hey, I will help you stand up to your business leader by taking money from their payroll department and fighting for you. That's a different story. But if they are pushing this, if they're trying to go out, get the corporatists in there to come back and have the AFL-CIO tell you how to run your business, or even if it comes down to a point where they don't want to do the work anymore, they just want to sit and get paid for doing essentially nothing, it is never too late to fire that staff. Keep in mind, and Brady Leonard of the No Gimmicks podcast brought this up to me when I had pointed out the fact that he had staff. He had a co-host and a producer that were helping him get his things done. So he doesn't have those anymore. But where he pointed out he still did most of his own work on the No Gimmicks podcast. One of the things that he pointed out to me is that nobody will ever care about your project, your dream, more than you will. Not the people that work for you, not the people that buy from you. Nobody will ever care about your dream as much as you will. So there are times where you're going to have to come back and protect it in the proper way. And if it comes down to the 193rd rule of acquisition, remember, it's your dream, not your employees. So it's not the best rule of acquisition, and I will usually point out when some of these do go against my code of ethics, but this is one of those that's on the line. I would rather never fire a staff. I would rather, again, be out there making business and making job opportunities for more people. But again, nobody's ever going to care about this project as much as I do. So that's where we're at with our rules of acquisition. And I think we're done. I think we're out of here. Let's get one more look at the live chat here. Mogwai's talking to Silentcaster, but I think Silentcaster took off. Mogwai says, I'd say this guy needs to be throat punched, but it sounds like life beat me to it. Cartman's version of the poker face is one of my favorites. I have not heard that. I have heard the Cartman version of Come Sail Away. And Mogwai says, my lobes need rubbing. Alright, let's call it a night. Let's finish up here. Save the Clock Tower, by the way. Hill Valley, 1985. Alright. Where's my outro music? Let's do this. I'm really hungry. Got knocked off the diet due to my coworker's generosity today. And if somebody brings me free coffee, even if it's got cream and sugar in it, I'm going to drink that free coffee. Absolutely. 100%. And there were definitely more than 20 carbs in that cup of coffee. So I had a regular lunch and I'm going to have a regular dinner. Some leftover mac and cheese, I think, and a burger that I made a couple days ago that I had left over. It'll give me a good opportunity to take up some of the leftovers, that's for sure. But my dietary and culinary interests are not what we're here for. We're here for the news and we're here to raid. So let's throw the outro music up and head out of here. Alright, so we are out of here. Since I didn't have the conversation with my mom last night, I do have to go touch base with Silentcaster, see what he's got going on after the show here. But with what we're doing now, we're going to head out of here for the night. Thank you, everybody who came by, chatted, hung out in the live chat, kept us on point, kept us going in, kept a little bit of a smile on the face, too, as we went back and going through this. We will be back here tomorrow with more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. So come back and join us for that. It's going to be a fantastic time. This is one of my favorite times of the day when I get to come back out, read the news, react to it, and get some reactions back from you guys. So thank you for that. We will see you here then. Who are we going to go raid? Who is going to be our Twitch raid for the night? I don't know, but first let's make sure that I'm muted over there. Oh, they don't like my password anymore. Let's see. Celestia is doing Stardew. We could do that one. Or we got Wind Waker again. Let's go do the Wind Waker one again. So we will go to Very Darien after this. Go see what's happening with the Wind Waker. Because I didn't get a chance to check that out last night. It was just chatting last night, so we will see what's happening there. Otherwise, come back and join me here tomorrow for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. We will see you then. And until tomorrow, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.